Welcome to Wine Soundtrack USA. Listen to the passion with which producers narrate their winery and their world in 30 answers. Discover their stories, personalities, and passions.
Hello, friends and listeners of the Wine Soundtrack podcast. This is Kim Cashmore, and today you are about to get a behind-the-scenes look of high-altitude winemaking with Molly Lonborg from Alta Colina. Alta Colina is located in Paso Robles, and Molly here is the winemaker. I'm so excited to bring this conversation to you today because Molly is the most friendly, bubbly person, and I think you're really going to enjoy this. So, welcome, Molly.
Hello, Kim. Thanks for having me.
So to start this off, can you tell me a little bit about the winery, where you're located, and the grapes that you're growing?
Of course. So we're Alta Colina Winery. We're located in Paso Robles, California, as you mentioned. It's about halfway between San Francisco and LA. We're on the west side of Paso Robles in what's called the Adelaida District. So there's actually 14 AVAs in Paso Robles. It's a very large expanse of land. And we are owned by a father-daughter duo, Bob and Maggie Tillman, and we grow estate Rhone wines. So all Rhone varietals. We have Grenache Syrah, Mourvedre, and Petit Syrah for our reds, and Grenache Blanc, Marsanne, Roussanne, Viognier, and soon to come Picpoul Blanc for our whites. We farm everything organically here, and being an estate vineyard means that the grapes never leave the property. So from berry to bottle, it's all here.
Oh, wow. I'm very excited about Picpoul. That's like a light, refreshing white, right? It's kind of like the thing low alcohol. Just making sure I'm remembering correctly.
Yeah, like your typical Picpoul de Pinet has lower alcohol. Picpoul literally, or like loosely translates to lip stinger in French. And so it's known for its high acid. Although it's really interesting because a lot of times we think these high acid grapes and we just think really lean and clean, where Picpoul Blanc actually has a lot of body behind it and weight. And so it can create just like this beautiful textural wine.
Oh, I can't wait to try that one day. If you haven't caught on yet, I am definitely a fan of Alta Colina personally. Delicious. I love a good Rhone wine, and I think that in Paso they make some amazing ones, and the quality is truly, truly unmatched. So, but before we get into more about the wines that you make, I think everyone here is really curious to know how you got into winemaking. Was this something you always wanted to do, or did this come about later in life? Tell us.
Yeah, so it's not something that I always thought I was going to do by any means. I'm from a little town in Northern California called Mendocino. We had a substantial crop there, but it was not wine. So, we grew up driving through the Anderson Valley to get to anywhere pretty much from the coast. And so we always drove through grapevines, but didn't come from a wine family, anything like that. I left Mendocino, traveled for a while, and decided to come to San Luis Obispo to go to Cal Poly and study earth and soil science. So I did that. I spent a year in New Zealand not doing wine. Actually spent a year studying geology in southern New Zealand. And when I came back, I noticed that Cal Poly had created this wine and viticulture department. So I was like, well, this sounds pretty fun. And I decided to pick up the minor, do a concentration in wine and vit. And at the time, I was thinking that I would go into the vineyard. I have all of this soil experience, climate experience. And so that was kind of where I was planning on heading. When I graduated in 2009, I knew if I went right into the vineyard that I would just never leave. And I felt like my education was good, but I didn't quite have the knowledge of winemaking that I knew I needed if I wanted to be able to grow good grapes. So I decided to work my first harvest in a lab. And then I traveled a bit, and that was down in the valley. And then I decided to work my second harvest in a cellar up here in Paso Robles. So I thought lab, cellar, and then go to the vineyard. But I just got hired full time, and then that winemaker left and went somewhere else and brought me with him. And so I just ended up staying on the winemaking track. I've been really lucky because every winery I've worked for has had an estate vineyard. So even though I'm never fully in the vineyard, I've always been able to kind of walk out the door and be in the vines. And so I feel like even though I didn't end up on that track, I still have a really close relationship with the vines. And my husband is vineyard manager over at Tallbless Creek. So we have lots of vineyard conversations around the dinner table.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, this is, compared to some of the other wineries in this area, this is considered more of a boutique, smaller winery. So even as you said, even if you're not fully doing, all of the vineyard things, you're still really involved in the vineyard.
Yes. And here at Alta Colina, I oversee the entire vineyard as well. So Daniel Martinez, our vineyard manager, and we work really closely on everything from, soil health. Bob is still involved in irrigation and soil health decisions. So the three of us really work closely on all those decisions. And Daniel and I are walking every block every week during the growing season and kind of watching vine balance and discussing, what it is I'm trying to get out of the grapes to craft in the winery. And so how we can achieve that through, proper crop and canopy management in the vineyard.
Mm-hmm. So tell us a little bit more about Alta Colina. This is a high elevation place. It's actually really interesting. When you come here, the winery is at the base of a hill, and then you take this long, winding, steep road up to the top, and at the top is this beautiful rolling hills at high elevation of vineyards. So how many acreages do you have here?
So the property itself is about 130 acres, 31 of which are planted. And so you were lucky enough to come up to the vineyard yesterday. And as you notice, it's this steep road to get up there. And pretty much Bob purchased the property in 2003, started planting in 2004, and that was a four-wheel drive road to get to the top. So there was nothing here. It would have cost about $4 million and a lot of moving of the land to be able to build a road that was in compliance to have a winery and a tasting room up at the top of the hill. That's why this is at the bottom of the hill. And funny thing, but Alta Colina literally means high hill in Spanish. So all this reference to our high elevation, high hills, hence our name, Alta Colina. So we have kind of these two hills that face each other, and I'm not sure how much we can see in the video here, but we have a beautiful map behind us that pretty much shows we're two hillsides that face each other, and it's really unique because we have a huge south-facing hill. We have a pond in the middle with 5 vintage trailers around them. We call the trailer pond that you can rent out, and then we have another hill that has a full north face, kind of a top, and then a south face to it. So that kind of comprises our 31 acres of vineyard land. And as I mentioned yesterday, the start of the project, started really small. We're still pretty small in comparison to many wineries, but we really started as what I like to say a farmer's market for local winemakers. So the majority of the fruit was sold, and then we made a little bit of wine for ourselves. And over time, that started to shift. So now we're keeping about 80% of the vineyard for our own program.
So can you tell us a little bit more about the different grapes that you grow and the wines that you make?
Yeah, of course. So I mentioned our 8, now almost 9 varietals. So our whites have become so popular.
They are amazing. The Viognier just stopped now. I think it's already sold out, right? The last vintage. So we're waiting for spring for the new bottling.
We are, but lucky you, I did grab you a barrel sample. So sorry for all you listeners and watchers, because I know that is not as exciting to hear other people enjoy wine, but we will at some point.
But it might entice you to try it. So yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So our whites have been selling out so fast. We do single varietal, Grenache Blanc, Viognier, Marsanne, and Roussanne. We also I do a Méteaux Champenoise, so a traditional sparkling wine out of Grenache Blanc. We'll be releasing our 2019. I'm going to disgorge this spring, and we'll release it in the summertime. So that's had about 4 years on tirage, which is really exciting. And then for our red program, we do a GSM, so a classic Grenache Syrah Mourvedre blend, just a very classic Rhone blend. We do a wine called Sun Worshipper, which is our Mourvedre focused blend. It's usually about 75% Mourvedre and then a little bit of Syrah in there, just to kind of be a little backbone. We have 2 main Syrahs, Toasted Slope, which is all from our south-facing slope, 2 different clones, and I love that wine. I like to call it, it's like our voluptuous woman. And then from the north-facing side of the hill, we make a Syrah called Old 900, which is another clone, but a single clone. And that is this real beautiful, but like a masculine, earthy Syrah. And so it's so interesting to have, just 3 clones, literally one hillside apart, and different aspects, but just completely different expressions of that varietal. In certain years, we do one Syrah called Keystone. That's actually one puncheon, which is the equivalent of 2 barrels. It's like a really big barrel. And we do one from each of the 3 blocks, and we put it in American oak. So it's kind of a different program. And then we do a single varietal Petite Syrah. So that's kind of our main lineup. And then we have some fun wines, like we do a Grenache Rosé Pet Nat. I make Grenache Rosé and also do a carbonic Grenache, and we do canned rosé. So we have kind of something for everyone, which is really fun.
Yeah. Can you explain for everyone what carbonic is? Because I think this is a term that someone last night was saying it's like hipster wine drinking. It's kind of like a new style of winemaking. And so could you give us a little more detail on what that entails?
Yes, of course. And it's so funny because I have my own brand called Little Soul Wines, but I only do rosé and carbonic. And my carbonic is called the old school carbonic. It's funny because we can say new school, but really carbonic maceration is such an old school style of making wine. My label is literally a hand with a boombox on it because to me that's my old school roots. And then it's like a nod to Beaujolais. So carbonic maceration is a style of making wine that's so different from typical red wine making. And it's been done for centuries. Specifically, it's most famous for the Beaujolais region. So it's usually done with the Gamay grape. If anyone's had Beaujolais Nouveau, you get that right around Thanksgiving every year, and that's usually 100% carbonic maceration. So what it is, just to back up a little bit. So if you think of a typical red wine fermentation, we're usually destemming the fruit. Sometimes there's some whole cluster in there, but for the most part, we're pumping over or punching down. So we're kind of separating the juice from the skins a little bit, and we're moving them. So we're trying to extract a lot of phenolic compounds from the skins, be that color, tannins, flavor molecules. And so that's how we get this kind of dark colored wine. When we do carbonic maceration, we take whole clusters and gently layer them into a vessel filled with dry ice. So we put some clusters in, put some dry ice in, clusters, dry ice. And then we seal up the whole vessel. And what we're trying to do is rid the environment of any oxygen. So whereas some people think carbonic maceration, they think the wine's going to be carbonated, and that's not the case. It just means that it was fermented in an environment that was filled with carbon dioxide. And so what happens is inside the berry, I'm going to get a little nerdy here just for a minute.
Please do.
Okay. Sometimes I can lose people on my nerdiness. But pretty much what happens, it starts out as an intracellular reaction. And so there's an enzymatic reaction that occurs inside the berry, and it starts to break down some of the sugars. And then the berries will just kind of slightly pop open. And we have native yeast that are all over the fruit. We have yeast that are coming in from the vineyard. Some people choose to inoculate on top of that. Some people use their native yeast to do their fermentations. So those native yeasts will start to kind of ferment, which means they're starting to convert that sugar to alcohol and CO2. So once that yeast gets going, that dry ice has already dissipated, but they're just producing more CO2 and thus filling the environment with more carbon dioxide. And so what happens, though, is the fermentation literally occurs inside the berry and without movement. And so you get this really light-bodied red wine that has completely different flavor and aroma characteristics. And generally speaking, we're not looking for the same color that we want for a typical red wine. So we're harvesting early. And therefore, we've got higher acid, we usually have lower alcohol. And these wines are really fun because you can even serve them slightly chilled. And so it's just like this amazing wine. Like we're in Paso Robles, it is hot here. And so to be able to come home, sometimes you want something a little more than a white or rosé, but you're not quite ready for a big red. And carbonic just like fits that. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. It is. From my personal experience, I really do enjoy it. And if you're a listener that hasn't tried it yet, you really should go out and try this new style. I mean, it's not really new, but it's a style that is becoming more popular, and it's worth experiencing on your wine journey. Okay, so you studied earth sciences, as you said, in university, and I'm assuming that sustainability and caring for the environment is very important. I think most winemakers feel that way. So what do you do at Alta Colina to, give back to the earth, make sure that you're taking care of your vineyards so they can keep producing? What are some of the things that you're doing?
Yeah, I mean, that's a huge part of our thought process for me personally in my life, and for us here. We're in agriculture, and we farm in an area that is hot, and we have a lot of plants to sustain. So we do have to irrigate. And so anytime we're using water to irrigate, that's just, we're using a resource. And so for us to be the best stewards of the land, we need to be thinking about everything and making sure we're using that properly. So water management is huge for us. We use special sap flow monitoring devices on our vines that help to tell us exactly what kind of use the vines are requiring based on the current weather. And that is huge. So we've been able to cut down our water usage a lot by that. We also use another company to calculate out our exact evapotranspiration on the property rather than referencing a square of grass that's grown somewhere else. And so that also helps us really dial in our irrigation needs. So the other facet of this is all soil health, right? And so having healthy soil is what's going to propel our vineyard for generations to come. And so we're a no-till vineyard site in between the vine rows. So the vineyard has not been tilled for 18 years, which is pretty impressive. We do have a little bit of tillage that goes under the vine row just for weed control, but nothing in between the vine rows. We made a couple of capital investments this year, which we're really excited about. We got a seed drill. So we've used just pretty much our native cover crop. Generally speaking, if you want to seed cover crop, you need to till the ground first. But we bought a seed drill that's allowing us to actually put seeds in the ground without having to till. And we also just bought a crimper, which is really fun. So instead of having to mow down the cover crop, we're going to let it grow, and then we're going to run this implement over, and it's going to kind of crimp it down and create a habitat for all of these microorganisms and fungi, and also just hopefully helps build our soil.
Yeah, and I feel like you can really taste that in the wines too. Speaking of, I know we saw each other yesterday, and you were mentioning about the quality and how important that is here at Alta Colina, and even to the point where you might not make as much wine as you could because of quality standards. So what is your mentality around that? Because I think that's what really can create an amazing wine, but it comes at a little bit of a risk. So I'd be curious to hear.
Yeah, it's a little bit of a different way of thinking about it. The wineries in general, we're backwards businesses. We farm to grow less fruit. And then here we make these wines, and we're so careful about what actually makes it into our final product. So, I just was looking in the 23 vintage, I have 26 red lots of wine. So those were different picks that I did. Out of those, they could be anywhere from 1 barrel to 8 barrels. And I don't taste as a lot. I taste every single individual barrel multiple times. And so I kind of grade everything, and then I use that for blending trials to always help determine what's going to be the best wine. And when it comes down to it, I've had many times where it's the wine club could really use another 25 cases, but everything here is quality driven. So we're never pushed. It's always whatever makes the best wine, that's what we're going to go with. And so we've had to make that hard decision multiple times of, you know what, this blend is better than that blend. And we taste everything blind. So we're not, we're just straight up picking whatever is best. And sometimes we end up having less wine than we want. But if we don't have those standards, then we're not going to have a good product, and the consumer is, our clients are family, and, they trust us to be giving them the best product. And so that's our job.
Yeah, I love that as a mentality for sure. Is this something that you kind of picked up over time in your winemaking, or was this something that you believed in from the beginning about like the importance of quality and what you need to do to attain that?
I think it's been an evolution. It always depends where you work and what that company's ethos is. And I understand when you work at a large winery that has distribution, you have certain targets that you have to meet. And so, there are times when compromise comes into play. Well, I kind of like this blend a little better, but this one's still good and it gives me another 1,000 cases. So, there's nothing wrong with it. I just prefer this one. And the fact of the matter is, most people they're going to have no idea there was a better blend. So you have to make those decisions. As long as you always believe in the product you're still putting out. Just because one blend's better than the other, it doesn't mean another blend isn't good at times. But having the full company behind you and everyone kind of saying, no, here you have the freedom to just make the best wine. It's so refreshing. Yeah, so learned over time, I would say.
Gotcha. And you've worked at bigger wineries in the past, correct?
Yes. Yeah, this is the smallest winery I've worked at.
Where have you worked before? What's been your journey in winemaking? I know you said you were, cellar managing and working in the lab, but where were you doing more winemaking at?
Yeah, so I started as just a lab tech intern for Bayliana down in Edna Valley. And then I went and worked as just cellar intern up at Justin Winery in 2010, just before they sold. And then I was there. I got hired full-time there, and I stayed on for about 7 months, I believe. Maybe a little more. I think I was there for maybe 9 months total. And then I left there and went over to Halter Ranch and started as lab manager and then enologist, assistant winemaker. And then I was there for 9 years and left as the associate winemaker over there. And then came here to Alta Colina. It started March 2nd of 2020, kind of precarious beginning of a new career or a new job. And yeah, Bob Tillman, our founder, had been the winemaker since the inception, but he had been kind of looking for somebody to take over the reins as he was looking at maybe a 10-year plan of phasing out of the winery or out of the business for him. And so, yeah, it just kind of worked really well. We're both very nerdy people. We both like to experiment and we like facts, but we also have a strong passion for wine and its beauty and the craft. And so we've worked really well together, and he's kind of he pretty quickly just passed over all the reins.
Oh, well, that's awesome. And congratulations. I mean, just on your journey, I think it's exciting for any winemaker to get to a place where they're really running with it, and I know that you were always trying to make the best wines and kind of go with the philosophy that was put in place by, at Alta Colina. So but I know it's really exciting as a winemaker to get to run the show.
It is. I mean, when you have complete control from berry to bottle, it's such a different thing. I mean, I was really lucky at Halter Ranch because when I came on, they were a small winery and we were growing and creating a wholesale presence. And as an assistant winemaker, it was the winemaker general manager and I that were sitting down and creating, okay, what wines do we want to make? What grapes do we want to grow? And how do we want to get there? So, and I did have a lot of creative control there as well. So that was really special. But it's different, when you go from making 30,000 cases to 3,000 cases, everything, it is a different level. And so it's been so fun here. And I've been very thankful because Bob has let me kind of do some new creative outlets, things like the carbonic and the canned rosé and things. He's always open to these fun ideas, and that makes it really special too. So he's always said, hey, if you ever think of like a special wine club wine, like go just roll with it. I'm like, okay, great. So like my first year here, I bottled a single varietal Grenache because I tasted 4 Grenache barrels that I loved, and I said, what do you think? Can we do Grenache? And he said, well, gosh, we haven't bottled a single varietal Grenache since 2012, and there was a bit of issues with that one, so I don't know, we're all a little nervous, but if you think so, that's fine. And so we did it, and everybody loved it, and it was great.
Okay, so I want to quickly just highlight Little Soul, which is your own personal brand that you make wines for. And what is the ethos, the idea behind it? What kind of wines are you making?
Yeah, it's funny. So at this point now, I've been in the winemaking side for 15 years, and I never like knew I was going to have my own brand. Coming to Alta Colina was kind of just serendipitous. My husband and I, we live on a property that we farm, and we had some extra Pinot Noir grapes, which is very random for Paso Robles. And I asked Bob, hey, do you mind if I make some wine? He said, sure, no problem. And thus, decided to start Little Soul. I craft these big, luscious wines is what I do for Alta Colina. We grow high elevation fruit, like we've said multiple times here, which means we have smaller berries, which means we have a lot of color and a lot of tannins. If I tried to make a really light, weak wine out of that, I just wouldn't be doing the fruit justice. And so I'm here to just tell the story of the grapes, right? And to not mess it up, and to highlight them. And so I love these big wines that we're making, but when it comes to the end of the day, like when I go home, I usually drink these like lighter, fresher, low alcohol wines. And I always knew if I was ever going to start a wine brand, first of all, it had to be something that I wanted to drink, because if it flops, like I better be able to consume my product. I used to do a lot of sales for wine. I spent five weeks a year on the road doing sales. And it's really fun. You get to go to meet new people, go to new places, eat great food, and have a great time. At the end of the day, like I love making wine. I just don't love selling wine. And so I just didn't want to create a brand where I was going to, have to have a tasting room and be there on the weekends. And, I have a family. I have 2 kids under 5. And, it's really important to me to be able to show up and be there as a mom outside of harvest. Not the best mom during harvest. And so with Little Soul, I knew if I could kind of create a small brand, mostly rosé, or just rosé and carbonic. I do Pinot Noir, which is, first of all, very different for our area, and second of all, in no competition with my day job. So that's pretty nice. My daughter's name is Alma, which means soul in Spanish. And so when she was 5.5 months old, we spent a month in Oaxaca with her, because we both had to go back to work before we finished all of our maternity, paternity leave. So we're like, well, let's just baby bond on the beach in Mexico. So we took her there, and immediately the locals started calling her Almita, which means little soul. And so after that trip was when we decided to start our own brand, and it just kind of felt fitting to call it Little Soul. Yeah, so it's pretty fun. It's honestly, I'm so lucky. I have such an amazing group of friends and family and network of people from this industry. It's a really special area here in Paso Robles especially. So my whole brand has been with the help of friends and family. Like I was telling you, my friend helped build my website. My carbonic label is one of my best friends, wood carving. I have my other friend does all my label design. These are childhood friends I've grown up with. And so it's just, I feel like it's just this fun kind of fabric that we're able to all wrap ourselves in this special way. And yeah, it's fun.
Oh, that's amazing. It makes me just want to buy all your wines knowing the story. All right, so before we close out, just want to do some rapid fire questions.
Dun, 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 dun.
This is going to be hard. I know that winemakers and wine people in general hate this question, but favorite grape?
Oh, Grenache.
Oh, that's mine too. Ooh. Yeah.
I knew I liked you.
Okay. Favorite food and wine pairing?
Potato chips and champagne.
Wow, we're the same. Oh my gosh. No, I love champagne. It's champagne and chicken nuggets for me.
Okay. All right. Yeah.
Favorite winery in Paso that is not any of the ones that you work at?
Hubba Wines.
Favorite restaurant in Paso?
In Bloom.
Oh, all right, trying to think of another good one. For the editor, just cut out our pauses in between this and just go for the actual questions. Still or sparkling wines?
Still.
Rosé, white, or red?
All of the above.
Oh, I love it. Awesome. Well, thank you for playing the game with me, and thank you for being here. This has been such a wonderful conversation. You were so easy to talk to, and I'm sure that everyone listening here can agree that this was a really insightful conversation, but also so enlightening. Like, I feel so happy talking to you. So thank you.
Thank you. This was a pleasure.
And before we go, where can we stay in touch with you? Where can everyone listening follow along on your journey? Where can we get some of the wines? Tell us all the things.
Okay, yeah. So we've got the usual social media. So Alta Colina is on Instagram, Facebook. Little Soul is Little Soul Wines on Instagram, and we both have just the typical, web presence, so you can come and buy wine online. Little Soul is currently sold out, but I'm pre-releasing my next vintage. We'll release on January 18th, 2024.
Great. So if you're listening to this after that date, that means hurry to the website before it sells out. All right, Molly. Well, thank you so much. And thank you to everyone here that has been listening. Have a wonderful week, and we will see you next time. Bye.
Thanks for listening to a new episode of Wine Soundtrack USA. For details and updates, visit our website, winesoundtrack.com.